Welcome to Richplanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. I'm joined again today by campaigner, academic and author Dr. Nick Kollerstrom, talking yet again about the London bombings of July the 7th, 2005, in which 56 people lost their lives in the biggest mass murder on UK soil since the Second World War. For those who aren't aware, this atrocity was not carried out by Islamic extremists, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or any other group of men with brown skin and long beards, because there isn't a shred of evidence which points to this. If you know of any, please let us know. All the evidence points to a false flag operation in which security services were involved in killing the people they are supposed to protect. If you don't believe this, go to the Richplanet website, click on the top left hand corner, 7 shows, where you can catch up on hours and hours of analysis of the evidence which backs up what I'm saying. But today we are not here to discuss the evidence, Nick. We're here to discuss political responses to our assertions. But before we do that, let's just summarise briefly the key holes in the official story, Nick.
Well, Richard, there are a few what you might call very in-your-face discrepancies that might be worth mentioning in a very short time if you get a surgery interview with your MP. For example, the Edgware Road coach had 3 large holes in the bottom that was shown by the inquest, with people getting trapped in those holes and horrific scenes. And those 3 large holes are very graphically incompatible with the idea of a single terrorist bomber, and the holes were not actually anywhere near where they tried to place this terrorist. That's an example of a very graphic discrepancy. Let me give you one more, Richard. That the location where the bodies were all taken to and stored after the catastrophe of London bombings, set up by the Royal Artillery Company at Old Street. It was set up on July the 6th, that's the day before. It was a military company, had a contract, and it got all ready, and it got stuff at Tavistock Square ready to collect the bodies and refrigerate them and take them over. So that it's important to understand that cause and effect, cause comes before the effect, get the time sequence right. For example, when the 9/11 events happened, you got the huge FEMA lorries turning up to clear up the ground zero, and they turn up the day before on Monday evening. So that kind of thing where the time sequence is the wrong way around, I think especially these days everyone watched the film The Matrix and sees this as a sign of the fabricated reality that we're living in. When the housing for maintaining and keeping the dead bodies after the London bombing set up on the 6th of July, contracts awarded and they started up, that's an indication that it's a fabricated event, and that's the kind of things that are very direct and evident. We could say another one, Richard, as you're well aware, that there were no post-mortems on the bodies.
Yeah, not a single post-mortem, 56 people dead in some massive atrocity, and they don't do a single post-mortem.
Yeah, so we got at the inquest, we got this aghast and stupefied victim families who'd often had to wait about a week before they got the remains of the loved ones back again, having to cope with the idea of no post-mortems. And what was going on here? They were just treated as bodies to be labelled. Was there some funny business?
I think you suspect that post-mortems would have revealed the true cause of the deaths, i.e. through some sort of either military type explosives or some perhaps even other more sophisticated device.
Exactly, yes.
Which was not what we were told
yeah.
in the narrative that they had, hydrogen peroxide or whatever it was.
Yeah. So Richard, I suggest we need to try and focus on these very in-your-face discrepancies and impossibilities in the story that can be put across quite briefly, because they try to dismiss anything as conspiracy theory that they can't explain. For example, the BBC, its famous reporting of the 9/11 when the 7th tower fell down. The BBC was reporting it beforehand, and they tried to say, oh, when this came up, and people asked the BBC, oh, what's going on? They said, oh, we're not really into conspiracy theory, sorry. Well, we're not interested in their views on conspiracy theory. We just want to know why they reported the event before it happened. And the time sequence being out of joint like that is, I think, good evidence for this thing being a cooked-up job.
And of course, people can go to my website, richplanet.net, and Nick's website, which is terroronthetube.co.uk, to look in more detail at all of this evidence, which pulls huge holes in the official story. So you suspect that intelligence agencies were involved, in particular Mossad and perhaps MI5. Can you expand on that a little?
Absolutely, yes, Richard. My book might have underestimated the role of Israeli Mossad involvement here. I don't highlight that at all. I talk about FBI, CIA involvement, but the fact is, within about 2 hours of the event in Israel, on the Jerusalem Post website, they went up an article, Rules for Waging a Third World War, by Ephraim Levi, and it was all about the London bombings, and it knew too much about them. And it had obviously been composed beforehand.
Right.
And the phrase actually printed was, yesterday's bombings show all the hallmark of, as if the article was expecting to go into the next day's newspaper or something. And it knew too much about the locations and the proximity of the where the World Zionist Conference was arranged to Tavistock Square. And once again, if an article like that has obviously been written before, that does tell you a lot about the arrangement of the event.
Right.
You know.
So did it go out the same day as the London bombings?
Just to add, that is obviously not unconnected with Benjamin Netanyahu being in London to give a lecture at a conference, Israeli trade conference, and then being warned not to go 6 minutes before it happened.
Not to go out of his hotel room.
Yeah, he tried to obfuscate that, but there were various reports about it. It's quite clear that there was some advanced intelligence, Israeli intelligence, that things were going to happen.
So just to go back to the internet article that you're talking about, Nick, are you saying that was published on the same day as the London bombings?
Absolutely, yeah.
And it said and it said yesterday's bombings, so they put it out a day too early. Is that what?
That is the inference. Yeah, yesterday's bombings. And so on and so on. That was the afternoon of July the 7th in the Jerusalem Post website, not in the published newspaper, within a few hours. And they took it down a week later because everyone was complaining. Alex Jones was saying, hey, look, these guys knew too much.
Right.
What's going on here?
All right. So for those who are new to the concept of false flag terrorism, Nick, what would be the reason why various agencies such as Mossad or MI5 or CIA would plan such an atrocity on their own people?
Well, it's the whole concept of the unfolding New World Order, as shown in, for example, the American project for the New American Century, whereby if you've got 800 American bases all around planet Earth, you have to explain what they're doing there. And you haven't got the communist menace anymore. You've got to have them defending the civilized world against something. You can't say, we're here to plunder your resources and take all your raw materials. And so you've got the new meme for the 21st century of the war on terror, as if terror was something you could fight a war against. And that had to be taken to Europe after 9/11, and so it arrived in Madrid, and then it arrived in London, and then the very next day after it happened, the decision was made, I think the next day, for Britain to get the Olympics.
Right.
So it was like some deal was made, horrible deal was made.
Right.
Paris had halfway built the Olympics. They thought they were going to get it, and then suddenly, zoom, London gets it.
Right.
So it's a bit as if that deal was made. But basically, it was the meeting of Blair and Bush at Gleneagles, and Bush could not possibly have survived a week with those world leader politicians at Gleneagles in Scotland at the G8 summit, because he can't talk real politics. He couldn't talk. You know, he can just do, we are fighting the war on terror, we will not give in, we will walk tall. And Blair and Bush did that, and that was what the London bombings enabled them to do. That's why I had to synchronise with that Gleneagles event.
Okay, now I've looked fairly closely over the last 3 or 4 years or so at the evidence of the London bombings, and I'm convinced that what you assert in your book is true, and so I wanted to do something about this. And in 2012, in September 2012, I went to my MP and I gave him 6 documents. I'm just going to list what I gave him. And they're all available from richplanet.net if you want to download them and read them or print them out or take them to your own MP. There's a covering letter in there. There's a list of internet films and TV programs about 7/7. There's a document called Theorising Truth by Dr. Rory Ridley Duff, and that goes into the events at Canary Wharf on the day of 7/7, where we suspect the patsies were probably murdered by some covert group, and there's evidence of that in news reports. Also a report by Principal Police Intelligence Analyst Tony Farrell. I also included a letter that Nick wrote to Lady Justice Hallett before the inquest, and also a summary of Nick's book Terror on the Tube. I also gave my MP a copy of Nick's book and a copy of 7/7 Ripple Effect. So I was encouraging other people to do the same, to print these documents out and take them to their MPs, and I've had round about 100 people have done this, and we've got 38 replies so far from MPs in writing or verbally to their constituents, and we're going to have a look at some of them today, Nick. Now I've split them up into 4 or 5 different categories. I've referred to the first category as a blind rebuttal, which is a complete sort of, I'm not even going to look at this evidence because it's such a crazy suggestion. There's a rebuttal with comments where the MP is actually saying, well, I don't agree with this, and then they've given the reason why. There's non-committal responses where they don't suggest either way whether they're supporting the suggestions. There's a referral, which is where an MP has given the documents or passed them on to somebody else, and it's either been the Security Minister James Brokenshire or the Home Secretary, and the ones that have been sent to the Home Secretary seem to have been passed on to James Brokenshire, and we've got a number of replies from James Brokenshire. That's the Security Minister. We're going to talk about him a little bit later. One went to the BBC, the Director General of the BBC, and we've got a response from that, and another one, this was a letter sent to Gordon Brown. Gordon Brown's office sent it to the head of Counter-Terrorism Command, and we've got a response from them as well, which we're going to talk about. And the next section of responses were MPs that have shown some kind of positive attitude towards helping us get the truth out about 7/7. And my strategy is, and by the time this interview goes out, I will have done this, I'm going to contact the constituents that got positive replies from their MPs, ask them to contact them again and inform them of who the other MPs are that are positive on it, and see if we can create a little group of MPs within Parliament who can then perhaps campaign on our behalf within Parliament. That's kind of my thinking on this. But what were the highlights for you, Nick? And incidentally, you can read all of these MPs' letters in response to the documents from richplanet.net.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Richard, I feel we need to avoid putting an MP in a possible situation that would end their career. I think agreeing with this thesis we're putting forward is as such fairly impossible for a, or I suspect it may be impossible for an MP. Okay. I feel we want to support and encourage the good MPs, and to my way of thinking, the good MPs are those who are not members of any Freemason association, who are not Friends of Israel, and who vote against the war.
So just to interrupt you, Nick, that's an actual organisation called Friends of Israel, which MPs can sign up to.
80% of Conservative MPs are Friends of Israel.
Really?
This is a very shocking grip, which or influence, which I think Israel has upon British policy making now, and we want to encourage, find out those MPs who are not thus affiliated, because I think such affiliations, they lose the independence of judgment, and they lose the loyalty of serving England or Britain first. That's what the MB should be there for. Okay, so let's have a look at one or two of these replies, Richard. For example, an excellent one by Tim Farron MP, a Liberal Democrat, and he writes, he's thankful for being asked about so many unexpected loose ends in recent events of national significance, and he then says he will look at the information as being so crucial to a full understanding of the threat to democracy from so many rich and self-interested people. Now, I think that's a terribly valuable comment to have. And he's going about as far as he can in saying that it looks like there might be something in what you're saying.
And he's the MP for Westmoreland and Lonsdale. Okay, well, let's stick on the positive ones. We'll go through those ones first. This is just something from is it Sean James or Sian James from Swansea East. Apparently said she would take up the matter with the Secretary of State, so that's really a referral to the Secretary of State.
Right.
A constituent contacted Labour MP Alan Campbell and said that he was good and kind. He listened to everything, then asked a few questions himself, which I could easily answer, given the amount of research, especially about 7/7. I thought he was genuinely interested. He was especially bowled over by Farrell's table of evidence.
Oh, right.
He could not explain it away and actually held up his hands. I was supposed to be there for an hour, but was there for an hour and 40 minutes. He is really approachable and turns out to have a great sense of humour too. He said he will ring me on Monday. So that's Tynemouth Labour MP Alan Campbell.
Yes, could we just add here that Tony Farrell did an excellent analysis of the events in the way that he was trained to do as a statistical analyst, senior intelligence analyst, South Yorkshire Police. And he gave probabilities to the various claims that were made of the London bombings and evaluated which is the more likely story. So I'm glad to see that impress this MP.
Right, okay, well, come on to another positive one, Nick, which is from MP Charles Hendry. Did you note that one? This is MP for Wealdon. Have you got that one there?
Yes. Charles Hendry,
I'll just read it out. Thank you for your letter dated the 1st of November regarding your concerns about the London bombings. I am grateful to you for taking the time to write to me about this matter and to include your own research about this. Please be assured I will read the documents with great care.
Right.
So that's fairly positive. And Frank Doran, Aberdeen North. Please accept my apologies for not responding to you before now. I note the points you make in relation to 7/7 and the war in Iraq. I didn't see the programme you refer to, but I am obviously familiar with both issues. I am probably not the best person to ask in relation to the Iraq war. When I had the opportunity to vote, I voted against my own government and opposed the war. There is nothing in subsequent events which has changed my mind. Do you know if the vote for the war was after or before the bombings, Nick?
Well, I think it was before.
Before, okay. So this MP presumably is then saying that the London bombings didn't change his mind about whether the war was right or not. So you can maybe read that into this response. Okay. Any other notable ones?
Well, I thought Meg Munn from Sheffield was one of the most important.
Now she's in my rebuttal with comments category, so she's rebutted the claims, yeah?
Yeah.
So do you care to fill us in on that?
Well, she first of all took notice of Tony Farrell's scale of probability for assessing the events, though she thinks it was subjective, and she doesn't think that this proves the inside job hypothesis, then she alluded to my book, but says that it drew on coincidences and obscures actual events. So she wasn't convinced. Then Rory Ridley Duff, Theorising Truth, she says it uses probability and coincidence.
So she has looked at the documents clearly, and she's saying she doesn't agree that there's anything in them. That's essentially what she's saying.
She says that serious incidents often attract conspiracy theories which don't stand up to analysis, and then she recommends this total crap book, Voodoo Histories,
by David Aronovich, who is an arch debunker and skeptic.
So anyone who likes that must have thought processes like a flea flittering around the head, you know. It's just totally inconsequential.
She says, it is common for a series of instances... Oh, sorry, you've already read that bit. If I may suggest to you some further reading on this, I would recommend Voodoo Histories, the role of the conspiracy theory in shaping modern history. Yeah, okay.
So she has bothered to answer. She has focused her mind on the subject, and so I think it's worthwhile that you've got this reply. Let me just say that.
All right, then. Well, let's look at some other categories then.
Well, hang on. The important one is Andrew George. I don't know if that's, but he then approaches the BBC.
Yes. Okay.
Conspiracy people.
So this is one of the referral ones. We'll come to this one now.
All right. Yeah.
So most of the MPs that referred it on, as I said, got referred to the Security Minister or the Home Secretary. This guy decides to refer it to the Director General of the BBC. Right, I've got the BBC's response here. We're going to go for a short break now, Nick, and we're going to look at this BBC document after this.